Hi there, we're the Collins Real Estate Team. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give you some great information this evening.
We're excited to have you. We've brought in a guest. His name is Ryan Cohen with ProtestTax.com. He's helped us for several years, and he's going to teach us a little bit about how to appeal our taxes.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of us, reach out directly to Ryan, or leave a comment. We're happy to help.
Hello, my name is Ryan Cohen. My company is Protest Tax, ProtestTax.com. I'm here to help you learn how to protest your appraised values and teach you about property taxes. Okay, we're live. Hello, my name is Ryan Cohen. Today is Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, but I think y'all are going to watch this May 6th. So sorry I can't be there in person, but some information about myself. I own a company called Protest Tax here in San Antonio, ProtestTax.com. My email is listed there, Ryan@ProtestTax.com, and our phone number is 210-267-9984. I'll have all of this information again at the end of the slide, so if you don't copy it down, don't worry, or you can ask the Collins Real Estate Team and they'll give you my information as well. So today I'm going to talk to you about property taxes and specifically protesting them. Just a little introduction about myself. First and foremost, I'm from San Antonio. I went to Clark High School. I feel like if you're from San Antonio, you have to say where you went to high school. So went to Clark. I'm a graduate of UTSA and then went to A&M School of Law, which is actually in Fort Worth. And then I came back to San Antonio to open a legal practice here. And I protest appraised values full time now. Last year, we protested $2.35 billion in market value in 2025, which represented about 4,000 or so properties. Just quick disclaimer, even though I'm an attorney, this is not legal advice. All the information can be found in the Texas Constitution, Property Code, Tax Code, or the State Comptroller's Office. So today I'm going to go through the agenda. We're going to talk about property taxes, of course, an introduction, a calendar, and then we'll briefly talk about exemptions you can apply for, appraisal methods, how is the appraisal district appraising your property, how to file a protest, the protest timeline, how to prepare for your protest, what type of evidence you need, give you a quick pitch about how my firm can help, and then a Q&A. We'll probably won't do, but if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk with you about that. So quick introduction on property taxes. Texas has no state property tax and no state income tax, which means that on your tax bill you received, there's not a line item that says state of Texas, 1%. So there's no state income tax. The local government set the tax rates and collect property taxes. And that is what is used for local services such as schools, streets, roads, police, fire protection, and other services. And then additionally, Texas law requires property values be uniform and equal. That's why it's highlighted and underlined. That's very important. We want to make sure that you're paying your fair share, nothing more than that. So essentially at the end of the year, when you get your tax bill, all they're doing to calculate that is taking the appraised value of your property and timesing that by the tax rate of your property. And that's how much you owe in property taxes. So our goal is in a protest is to lower the appraised value down as low as possible so that the tax bill that comes out is lower than it would be had you not filed a protest. Going briefly over the tax calendar phase, starting at the very beginning of the year is January 1st through May 15th. They consider that the appraisal phase. That's when the district is appraising your property. January 1st is a very important date because that's the date that the district is required to appraise your property. So as of January 1st, what was the value of your property? So if you were in the middle of building a property, and let's say on January 1st, your property was only 70% complete, but then it was finished in March and you move in, well, we want to make sure that the district doesn't have your property at 100% complete for that tax year. So what was your property's condition as of January 1st? Were there any issues with it? What was the completion percentage? Around April 1st is when notices of appraised values are being sent out by the appraisal districts with a protest deadline of May 15th. The protest deadline is May 15th or 30 days after the notice of appraised values are mailed out. Here in Kendall County, I believe the appraisal district just mailed out notices of appraised values. And so that 30 days would actually be June 2nd. And we'll look at one of the notices here in just a few slides. So the protest deadline is normally May 15th, and afterwards is the equalization phase. That's when protests are challenged and heard and determined. So you file a protest before the deadline, and then you are scheduled for protest hearings. You're making sure everything is fair and equal. So that's usually May, June, July, August, even into September. And they've got to know what your value is before October. So when they send those tax bills in October, your value is certified, and then taxes are collected October through January 31st. So usually what happens, it's kind of a backwards process. You're protesting, for this year, you're protesting the 2026 value that is going to be used for the tax bill that comes out at the end of the year, which is normally due and paid by your lender if you have a mortgage, January of the following year. Yeah, what's going on?
I have a question. Sorry, that's awkward. You said that Kendall County got their notices. When did Bexar County get theirs? Because we do have some people watching from Bexar County.
Yeah, so Bear, I think, sent their notices back at the end of March. So before, even before April 1st. So their deadline would be May 15th. So
Okay.
the protest deadline is May 15th or 30 days after the notices are mailed out, whichever is later. Which, it's funny, there's some appraisal districts that I've got their notices and their protest deadline on there said May 10th. And I said, that is not accurate. That's not the law. So I called them because I already know the answer. And I say, why is your protest deadline May 10th? And they said, oh, because we mailed them out, April 10th. I go, well, actually, it's 30 days, May 15th or 30 days, whichever is later. And they got it wrong. They apologized, said that there was a mistake on there. And so even the appraisal districts don't know the law sometimes. So you got to be aware of that. But yeah, and also good point to ask them that question. The district isn't required to send a notice of appraised value unless your value increases by more than $1,000. And so you may not have gotten a notice of appraised value, but if you look on the district's website, you may notice, oh, my value is on there. It's either the same or it's less than last year. So if your value does not increase or go down, the district's not required to send you a notice of appraised value. Your protest deadline may still be May 15th. So just to be wary and cautious, I always say file your protest by May 15th, no matter what the notice of appraised value says on there.
So is that like in Kendall County, since they just went out, it's going to be 30 days later.
Yeah.
If you didn't receive one, is it then May 15th or is it in line with everyone else in Kendall County?
I would be cautious and say file by May 15th. I don't know the exact answer. When I called the district recently, they said that their protest deadline for the entire county is going to be June 2nd. And so we'll look at that. But file it beforehand. Even if your value didn't go up, if your value went down, you can still file a protest to try to get it down even further. Okay, good question. Okay, so exemptions are just tools to lower your property tax bill. You can file a late application up to 2 years back. So if you just moved into your property, file the application as soon as possible. You'll receive a refund check in the mail for your overpayment the last couple of years. The most common exemptions are the homestead over 65, disability, and disabled veteran homestead. Most of these are homestead exemptions. There are other exemptions such as a solar or historic exemptions. Regarding the over 65 exemption, it's the year you turn 65. And so you don't have to wait until you turn 65 to file for that or receive the benefit of the homestead over 65 exemption. So if your birthday is not until late December, you receive the benefit of the exemption for the entire year. Regarding Bexar and Kendall County, the appraisal districts, Bexar, they usually automatically, it will kick in right away. They know when you put your birth date in, their systems will say, oh, you turned 65 this year, you'll get the exemption. I'm not sure Kendall County has that software or technology to do that. So you may, if you live in Kendall County and you turn 65, you may want to just double check that the exemption has been updated to the homestead over 65 exemption. And homestead exemptions, you will need to submit a copy of your driver's license or government ID that also has the address updated. So if you do move into a property, make sure you update your driver's license before you apply for your homestead. Okay, moving on. So I know we'll touch base about homesteads here in a little bit, but most today's topics are about appraisals and how to protest your property. So we'll move forward with that. So again, as I mentioned with the time frame, the calendar, most taxable property has to be appraised as of market value of January 1st. And what is market value? Well, it's a simple definition. It's the price at which a property would transfer for cash or its equivalent under prevailing market conditions. If it was exposed in the open market, both seller and purchaser know all of the uses for the property, and they seek to maximize their gains. I underlined open market because there's a lot of times when I have property owners that may be real estate investors that buy properties off market. And most of the time when they do buy it off market, they're distressed properties and they get them for hundreds of thousands of dollars less than what the appraisal district has it on their roll. And so they'll usually push back on those because they'll say, well, it was an open market transaction. If it was on the MLS, it's an open market. That's the definition, right? On the market, open for purchaser and sellers to maximize their gains. And so just be wary of that. Even open market, you can argue for auctions. We can say that those are open markets as well. So the three common approaches that the appraisal district uses in appraising property are the market data comparison approach, the income approach, and the cost approach. The first one is the market data approach. That is single family homes. What was the value on the market? What are homes selling for in your neighborhood? The second approach that the district will use to appraise property is the income approach, which is properties that produce income, apartments, strip centers, anything that generates income, you pay rent. The last approach that the district can use is the cost approach. That is, if it doesn't fit any of the first two, or if you just built a property, then how much did it cost you to build that property, or the replacement cost. So we can use all three of those appraisal methods, but mostly we'll focus on single family homes because I'm sure a lot of you just have single family homes, and that would be the market data or sales comparison approach. So we'll talk about that more briefly, but to file a protest, a property owner has to file a protest either in writing or electronically if it is your residential homestead. Most appraisal districts have online accounts where you can e-file a protest, but there are protest forms available. We'll look at one here in just a little bit, but the property owner is not required to use one. A notice of protest just must identify the owner and the subject property and indicate that the property is dissatisfied with the decision made by the appraisal district, aka incorrect market or appraised value. You've got to select a reason for your protest. So again, the property owner must file the notice of protest before May 15th or no later than 30 days after the appraisal district has mailed the notice of appraised value, whichever is later. And then just a side note, make sure when you do file a protest to make sure you ask for the district's evidence and request an informal hearing, which we'll talk about here soon. So I'm sorry if you can't see this, but this is a notice of appraised value. It's kind of hard to see, but I'll kind of talk with you about this briefly. So this is the document that you'll receive if you do receive a notice of appraised value. On here, it will show you last year's value, 2025, and then the proposed column on the right, it will say 2026. And I chose this notice of appraised value. This is actually one that was sent to one of my property owners in Kendall County, is because this is also homestead property. So on the last line here where my cursor is, it says HS, that says for homestead. And last year, the appraised value of my client's property was $430,000, I believe. And if you have a homestead exemption, the assessed value of your property cannot go up by more than 10%, even though the appraised value can. So last year was $430,000. So 10% more than that is $473,000, I believe. And so this line right here says 473. That's exactly 10% more than last year's value. However, her market value, which is the appraised value, was actually around $500,000, right? So even though her appraised value went up by more than 10%, her assessed value is less than that because, again, if it's your homestead property, your assessed value can only go up no more than 10% year over year. This line underneath this number right here, it doesn't show anything, but it should show a number there. That's your homestead cap. That's the difference between your appraised value and your assessed value. And also, I want to make another note. Even though this line says appraised value, that should really say assessed value. And then 2 lines above that, it says total market value. That's the appraised value. That's the value that you're protesting. So the assessed value is what you're actually paying taxes on. The appraised value is total market value. So there is some confusion about the language, even though the district uses the line appraised value. That is your assessed value. So let's assume that this year, instead of $500,000, the district placed a value of $1 million, right? So it went up from $430,000 to $1 million, her appraised value, but her assessed value, because it's her homestead, could only go up 10%. So when we go to a protest, we start with the appraised value, the $1 million. So unless we get that below her assessed value, a protest won't really make a difference. It may make some differences if you reduce the depreciation percentages, et cetera. That might help out down the road. But just want you to be aware when you are looking at these numbers, what value you're actually protesting versus what value you're actually getting taxed on.
So just to clarify, are you saying you might win a protest but still have to pay the same amount of taxes?
That's correct. And the reason we've seen that is when values, especially homestead properties, the market kind of went crazy in 2022 where values went up 30-40%, right? And so if you had a homestead, you were capped at that 10% increase in assessed values. So this does not apply to properties that are not homesteads. So yes, you can win a protest, but your assessed value may remain the same until eventually it catches up. It's not going to go up 10% every year. So what we've seen is those values that jumped up in 2022, last year was really the last year that properties had a homestead cap.
And so I guess it is important to protest, even though you may pay less this year, a couple of years down the road, that 10%, if you can keep protesting the appraised value, that 10% will catch up to it at some point and then they can't raise it 10%. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So it's important to protest every year because, yes, you may get your value down and it just helps create a baseline for the following year. So keeping your value down as low as possible establishes the true value of your property. And you're really, you don't want your value to go up 30-40% every year. If not, then that 10% is just going to keep going up and up. So it's fortunate that you do have that protection as a homestead, the homestead cap. But again, you want to protest every single year. It's to be on the safe side. So this is the notice of appraised value. On the bottom right here, it'll say protest deadline. And here it says June 2nd, 2026. And it says ARB begins hearing June 3rd. So this is the notice of appraised value for Kendall County that I just sent out with a protest deadline of June 2nd. And on the top, you'll actually see the date that it was sent out, date of notice May 1st. So that's why it's past May 15th. That would be not 30 days. So the deadline for Kendall County per this notice is June 2nd. Okay, so attached to the notice of appraised value, the district will also send you the notice of protest form. So this is the form that you can use to file a protest. My client's information is already filled in, so if you get sent this form from the district, your information will also be on there. But if you are just downloading this form from the appraisal district, it will just be a blank form. Some of the most important information, which you can't really see under section 2, it says reasons for protest. That first text box is the incorrect market value or value unequal with others. That's the most important checkbox you need to select, because if you don't select that, then you're not really protesting anything. There are other reasons, such as a circuit breaker, or if there's an exemption that was denied or removed, if your owner's name is incorrect. But for protest purposes, the only one that you'll select is the incorrect market value or value unequal with others. You can put some notes in here, additional facts for your property. Let's say it was a recent purchase, etc., whatever. And then ask you, what is your opinion of value? It says optional. I don't ever put an opinion of value. I let the district make the first offer. Unless you want a value and you're seeking a value, you can put that there. If it's fair and reasonable, the district may decide to go with it. Regarding the hearing types, the first box there is the informal conference. So as I mentioned, when you file a protest, you do want to ask for an informal hearing. That is your opportunity to speak with an appraiser one-on-one about your property. And then underneath that, it asks for how do you want to appear if you do go to appraisal review board hearing. So there's two parts of the protest, the informal and then the ARB formal hearing. If you elect to go to the formal hearing, you don't settle informally. You can either go in person, by phone conference, video conference, or even by written affidavit. So you could just file a written affidavit, submit it with your evidence, and you don't have to appear. They'll read it into the record, and it's as if you were there in person. Another note here, I don't think I found it on this notice of protest for Kendall County, but you do want to ask for the district's evidence. I mentioned that. you could probably put that under additional facts, request district's evidence. There's not an area on here to check for the district's evidence, so make sure you ask for that.
So when we have protested our taxes personally here in Kendall County, what I have found is meeting with someone face to face is always the best. I'm sure it's this way in Bexar County. I haven't done it there, but in Kendall, I found that most people in the appraisal district, they really want to help. They really do look to help lower the tax value of your home, and so I always go in friendly, and I walk out best friends with that person, and they normally give me what I want. So that's why he says do the informal.
Yeah, do the informal. And yes, you're correct. In Kendall County, an informal is usually in person, face to face with an appraiser. They'll sit you down at their desk. And then for Bexar County, I think they don't do informals in person. They'll either give you a call or it's either through the electronic process. So because there's so many properties in Bexar County, their informals are not in person. They may have changed that, but I know over the last few years, especially with my firm, we handle everything either through spreadsheets, phone calls, and go back and forth quite a bit. And so, yeah, but at least for the formal hearings, we always go in person because that's the best thing you could do. Unless we have one property kind of in the middle of nowhere, then we'll just do a video conference. Okay, this is the second page of the notice of protest form. The notice of protest form. So it's two-sided for Kendall County, Bexar County is just one. However, let me go back here. So this may not apply to you. This only applies if your value, I think, is over $57 million or greater. And then you'll sign and date it as the property owner. And make sure you submit this. I always suggest to file this protest in person if you are not completing an electronic file, because if it gets lost in the mail, then that's on you. If you do mail it, make sure you just pay $3 or $4 for a certified mailing, just so you have a receipt that it was filed on time. Because that's the most important thing, is that you file a protest before the protest deadline. On that notice of appraised values form, you do have to select a reason for your protest. The first one is the incorrect appraised value or value unequal with others. Always select this option. That is your argument for a market and an equity protest. If you don't select this option, then you won't be able to hear your market and equity protest, and there's really no point to filing a protest if you don't select this option. They used to be two separate options, but now they've combined it because they know that everyone selects both options, and that, again, is your market and equity. So when you do request the district's evidence, there will be two different grids that the district generates. There'll be your market grid, which are homes that have been sold in your neighborhood. And then there will be an equity grid, which aren't homes that are sold, but more homes on your street. What are your neighbors paying for their properties? And so the district is required to give you the lower of two values. So that's why it's important to file both a market and equity protest. So when you do provide your evidence, which we'll talk about, you want to provide sales, which the Collins Real Estate team can provide you with CMAs, as well as homes that have sold in your neighborhood. Or if you go to the appraisal district's website and you look at your neighbor's property, you can also present those comparables, but that would be more on the equity side of things. Okay, so you filed your protest, and now you have been scheduled for an informal and formal hearings. The informal, again, is one-on-one with an appraiser. That is when you present evidence, and if you do agree to a value, you will sign a settlement and waiver of protest. That ends the protest, and that is the value that is going to be used on your tax bill at the end of the year. If for whatever reason you can't agree to a value, then you'll be scheduled for a formal hearing. Usually that's scheduled 2 weeks after your informal date, but sometimes they'll schedule it the same day. They'll only schedule you for a formal hearing, and they'll say if you want to speak with an appraiser informally, show up 30 minutes before your hearing and you'll have the opportunity to speak with an appraiser. I know in Williamson County, that's how it works there. I'm only scheduled for a formal hearing, but first I always go back to the appraiser's desk and we go through our properties, try to settle informally. And then if we can't settle any of the cases informally, we walk over to the appraisal review board and we conduct a formal hearing there. The last step is arbitration or judicial appeal. You can sue the appraisal district, but you're only given that right to continue with an arbitration or judicial appeal if you receive an A or B order. So you can't settle informally. You've got to let the appraisal review board make a determination of value. Just some tips for the informal and formal. Come prepared. Again, that's the time for you to present your evidence. And then for the formal hearing, instead of you working one-on-one with an appraiser, you sit at a table. The appraiser will usually be with you. Then you'll present your evidence, the district will present their evidence, and the appraisal review board, which are 3 members of the community, they don't work for the appraisal district, they'll make a determination of value. They'll ask if you want to go first or second to present your evidence. You always want to elect for the appraisal district to go first. That way, they're not really caught off guard, but when you present first, it gives them opportunity to kind of build their case against you. And the appraisers are hearing hundreds of protests every day. They're not preparing for your hearing. So the first time that they're looking at the evidence that the district has for your case is usually at that hearing. So when they go first, they're kind of, blind to what they're arguing. As compared to if you go first, it gives them an opportunity to review their evidence that they're going to present, kind of build their case a little bit up. And so tip there is to always let the appraisal district present first, and then you'll go second. They'll get a rebuttal, and then you'll get final closing. The appraisal review board members will ask questions if they have any, and then they'll make a determination of value. At that hearing, the district could also offer you a settlement. So let's say you don't settle informally, but then you go to the formal hearing and the appraiser says, actually, I'll be able to offer this now. Well, if you agree to that offer, you will still sign a settlement waiver. You won't get an appraisal review board order, and you'll lose any rights to the arbitration or the judicial appeal. So I guess in summary, for the informal and formal hearings, it's very relaxed. It's not like in a courtroom. You don't need to stress about it. It's a pretty smooth, easy process. Okay, so you filed your protest, you've been scheduled for hearings. What evidence are you going to bring? Well, it's important that you do have evidence, because if you just show up and say, my value is unequal, it's too high, with no basis to offer a reduction, they're not going to care. So evidence is very important. For residential evidence, as we mentioned, market data. What are the district's sales? What sales are in your neighborhood? As far as timeline goes for 2026 protests, the district will consider a sale from January 1st, 2025 through March 31st, 2026 as material evidence or material sales. So don't bring a sale from 2024 for this year's protest. Even if you just bought a property in 2024, it may seem like you just purchased it. That sales price won't really have too much weight for a 2026 protest. If this was last year and you just bought it, then yes. Or you purchased it in 2025, of course, you want to let them know what you purchased for if your value is less than the current appraised value. Great, so you've filed your protest, and now you've been scheduled for an informal hearing. The most important thing is that you prepare for the hearing. You can't just show up and say that your value is too high. You've got to provide evidence. Again, for residential property, you want to provide market sales because the property is being appraised on market sales. And so for protest for 2026, you'll want to provide sales from 2025 to March 2026. So that 15-month window is considered material sales. You don't want to provide a sale from 2024 or earlier. That would not be considered a material sale date, and the district won't consider that. If you do need sales data, you can ask your realtors here at the College Real Estate Team to provide CMAs. That is most common evidence that normal property owners will bring are mostly CMAs from your area, sales, so they know exactly what your neighborhood has been selling for. Regarding the other type of evidence, again, when you're going to a hearing, you want to say that your property value should be lower. So how do you do that? Well, you also provide personal evidence. We can provide photos of property damage, any estimates for repairs, electrical issues, plumbing issues, if your property backs to commercial property, easements, construction that started that year. There's a lot of personal evidence that you can bring to the hearings, and that's really important because the district doesn't have that information. And you can provide photos on the interior and the exterior of your property. So the most common photos that we have, property owners give us for our protest, are cracks on the inside or outside of their home, indicating foundation issues, any invoices or receipts that they've made for repairs. Hail damage is pretty common here in South Texas. So any issues with that, you can provide evidence as well, and we'll add that to your file. For commercial property, again, if it's not a residential single-family home, if it's an office or maybe a multifamily apartment, then the district is valuing the property on an income approach. And so we need to be prepared to show rent rolls, vacancy rates, NOI. The district's evidence that they'll provide to you is an income worksheet where they'll list the net operating income, expenses, vacancy rates, and you need to review that to make sure that that is accurate. Again, the other type of evidence is cost approach. If you just built this property, we have clients that keep track of all of their building expenses. We want to make sure we provide that to them as well. So again, evidence is important just because if you show up without it, the likelihood of success is not very high. You've got to be able to show sales in the area, personal evidence, or even financials for commercial properties. So if you don't want to protest yourself, you can hire a tax agent to represent you. I know there's a lot of tax agents out there. We're local, we can help. My firm charges a contingency fee, so it's free to sign up, and our fee is 25% of the estimated tax savings before exemption. So we only charge if we're successful at your protest hearing. So to give you a quick example, if your tax rate is 2.5%, that means that every $10,000 we reduce in appraised value, you would save $250, right? 10,000 reduction times 2.5% is $250. So if you did hire us and we reduced your value by $10,000, you would save $250 on your tax bill. Our 25% would result in a fee of $60.50. For homestead properties, we also cap our fees to $150. And for homestead over 65 properties, we cap our fees to $65. The example that I gave with the homestead where the appraised value was higher than the assessed value, that is the reason why we started to cap our fees just a few years ago, because how successful we are at your protest hearing is really how well did we reduce the appraised value of your property. And we would sometimes get values down by hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they were still capped at an assessed value a little bit lower than that. And so we capped our fees to $150 as more of a service. But even if you don't have a cap and we save you truly, $2,000, we would still only charge you $150 for homestead properties. We also work with a nonprofit in San Antonio called My City is My Home. They are a local nonprofit that works with the American GI Forum. We represent a few hundred properties for free. You can see if you qualify for a free protest on our website, protesttax.com. To qualify, you have to be considered low income and have an appraised value, I believe, less than $200,000. But if you do decide to protest yourself, just show up on time, stick to the facts, don't get emotional. As Aaron said, it's important just to be nice and become buddy-buddy with the staff, and they'll work with you as long as you work with them and you're respectful. And so that's protesting in a nutshell. If you have any questions, then you can reach out to me. You can reach out to me at ryan@protesttax.com is the best way to get a hold of me. Or if you want to sign up, go to protesttax.com and sign up in just about a minute or two. We'll get everything we need from you there. Or feel free to reach out to our office at 210-267-9984 and feel free to talk with us and be happy to help. Again, most important thing is that you follow protest in time, because if you don't, then it's too late. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to help.